Hey, my name is Patrick Lovell, and sorry for my appearance. I'm doing this on the fly on Tuesday, February 6th, 2024, the week of the Super Bowl, approximately noon my time. And I'm doing this on the fly because I was asked to record an introduction to the Clean New Deal um, and make it brief. If you know who I am, I deliver a lot of very long sermons slash um, uh, what is it when you're a professor and you lecture, right? So I do that, which is all part self therapy for me, in what I call the Patrick Level Truth Bombs to Con. And it's all in service to what we're calling the Clean New Deal, which is a movement, a mass movement to purge corruption, a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption and drown the fascism it fuels because of the information that I have as a producer, as an investigative journalist, as a muckraking journalist that I put together in our work, our monumental work, our prescient work, the work that is the blueprint for everything that is happening, which shows you exactly what created the 2008 great financial crisis. And the sum total of my podcast, the new Untouchables that we did with the Real Progressives, and then all of my truth bombs really is to pinpoint what the system is that nobody can see the forest for the trees to be able to get you to understand the eye of Sauron, quite frankly, and where the evil emanates from and who has complete control and why it's completely antithetical, illegal, and just the opposite of what we believe we are as Americans, which means it's been a massive rug pull, a massive hijacking, a massive diabolical cabal of monumental conspiracy to be able to betray the United States of America. And why am I, riffing, which I call truth bomb riffing, which is all of the above, this morning, because I just got back from a hike with my dogs in between 15 other things that I've got going on is really the timing. But I was somewhat spawned, if you will, by two things that just happened on my feed that I think are entirely appropriate to be able to tee up what the Clean New Deal is and why. So the first is that the appeals court just ruled that Donald Trump is not immune to prosecution and criminal prosecution um, while he was president of the United States. It just seems like common sense to most people, but it never happened before. So there was never a precedent, and that's important in terms of how the law is set forth that even bothered to answer the question, even though it seems like common sense. But therein lies the problem of what the United States has become. The common sense of what we are based on our principles, based on separation of powers, based on the Bill of Rights, based on the Constitution, all of which were born from a revolution against tyranny, and then the history that created and led to the Civil War, and then the triumph of the North that basically broke the bonds of slavery, that then allowed Jim Crow to exist. And then we had another 100 years of hypocrisy, particularly in the South, until we had the Civil Rights Movement after, of course, global wars and then the war on fascism and many things that happened in the Supreme Court and so on and so forth, which is in order to form a more perfect union, the evolution of the United States, we, the flawed people, in order to form something that makes more sense, in which liberty and justice for all reign supreme based on a dynamism that enables equality and fairness, but also should provide a safety net because of the nature of what I don't want to call us the American empire because we're failing and we're about to do a nosedive in a monumental way. But getting back to Toby Keith and I didn't mention Toby Keith. I'm really blowing this, but at the same time, I'm going to go with it because I just think it maybe the natural way of things and the way my mind thinks. Hopefully you can get a taste of and understand what I'm trying to do to fit all of these different pieces together of this monumental landscape of just overloaded information and misinformation and distraction, deception, and all sorts of different techniques of psychology in the midst of what we have to do as we the people to take the power back. And that's what we're going to do in this monumental tidal wave crusade to purge corruption and drown the fascism that it fuels. Do I understand the hyperbole, the hyperbolic nature of the language? Yes, I do. Do I understand what it means to purge in a society? Oh, yes, I do. Am I proclaiming a massive, violent, horrific revolution that's going to murder all of the entities that are responsible for the mass betrayal that has deceived all of us? Actually, no, I'm not. And the reason I'm not is because we still have a tiny shred of the vestibules of the law. And if tens of millions of us understood what is going on, we'd understand how the nature of all things trump that is being demonstrated in the courts, where we're seeing small victory after small victory, which some people would proclaim are monumental victories, but in the form of E. Jean Carroll's defamation lawsuit, an $84 million judgment. What's going to come down in the Judge Ergeron case in the civil fraud trial of Letitia James versus the Trump organizations that could lead to north of $500 million in fines, which would force Donald Trump to be bankrupt. These are wins, but also the appellate court ruling that Donald Trump is not above the law. These are all momentous scenarios that are leading me to believe that there's a very strong possibility Donald Trump's going to jail before the election. But man, let me tell you, it's a race. And Merrick Garland, the AG of the Department of Justice, dragged his feet for so long that he put everything into jeopardy, particularly everything that's being slow rolled in Judge Cannon's court based on DOJ versus Donald Trump and stealing classified documents and whatever else shapes up in all of the different criminal scenarios, particularly the stupidity of DA Fani Willis, who's gotten now involved with a salacious sex scandal that could blow up one of the most important aspects of what Donald Trump did to steal the election through racketeering. But what you have to understand is that the government, the federal government of the United States, is demonstrating that everything Donald Trump is guilty of, they let Wall Street get away with, which is what I'm revealing to you. So let's take Toby Keith, for example, right? I remember singing Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue at the top of my lungs, drunk off my ass on many occasions because I was so, I don't know, just lost and inspired, but angry and all of the rest of it following 9/11, only to learn many years later that, of course, Toby Keith would, basically have no pride alongside Donald Trump and go perform in Saudi Arabia. Why is that relevant? Well, I've done tons of truth bombs on it the whole time, but ultimately, regardless of how we want to unpack 9/11 and our relationship with Saudi Arabia, what you need to understand is that the dollar is the world's reserve currency, predicated not directly and completely dependent upon, but a large portion of it is, as well as Saudi Arabia's investment in the United States, which is part and parcel to why everybody from Toby Keith to Wall Street to Hollywood to Donald Trump are all in the midst of, hey, nothing to see here, as well as Israel by way of Saudi Arabia, not to mention the human rights, just abominations that Saudi Arabia represents, that everybody would just basically drop their pants or get on their knees or whatever, analogy you would want because of money. But ultimately, the U.S. reserve currency is dependent upon, like I just said, which leads to this humongous hurricane of issues that we're still in the midst of and have been for the last 20 years at least, but it's been building for the last 50 years. But it all undergirds what it is that I'm revealing to you, okay? And I learned a long time ago that there's two columns of our soul. You have character, integrity, honesty, dignity, and decency versus hypocrisy, duplicity, complicity. These are the sort of expressions of the human experience, and everybody skews one way or the other depending on what's going on and what's at stake. And as I've just represented to you with Congress and Wall Street, in our legal profession, in the accounting professions, and all of the professionals in this country behind the facade that has become our economy would easily, of course, do all things like Toby Keith did, including the PGA and, I don't know, just imagine every other sports sort of franchise that exists that the Saudis have got their finger in to whitewash everything that they're in the midst of. Meanwhile, decapitating anybody who goes against the Saudi crown and allowing all sorts of human rights problems and everything that happened in Yemen and, that fuels ISIS and Wahhabism and whatever, for what? Religious theocracy. which in many ways has come back to roost in the United States. Did we just see Matt Gaetz and the Republicans basically saying, no, the law is not the law, and Donald Trump is, this vestibule of democracy, this expression of democracy? Meanwhile, the guy is guilty of 91, well, guilty, getting more and more close to everything. But in terms of the evidence, the indictments are that Donald Trump defrauded the United States using deceptive acts and practices through a variety of schemes, including electioneering scheming in terms of documentation fraud with the electoral scheme, with the Electoral College, and that aspect, which was all racketeering using lying attorneys and lying judges. Okay. And it goes from there, and so much more. And all of my truth bombs at Patrick Level Truth Bombs to Con details all of this on a daily basis, reacting to it all, but at the same time, to get you to this notion of what we show you in the con, which is the blueprint of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in the history of the world that never ended. And it'd be one thing if it was complicated, but it's not. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering. What we show you in the con, A plus B equals C, is so much beyond what The Big Short ever presented to us and got mostly wrong, even though it was a great film. And quite frankly, the same with Inside Job before, which never even came close to what we revealed to you in the con, and what I also revealed to you in the new Untouchables, all of which reveals that in 2009, the United States enabled the Federal Reserve, which many people think is independent of the United States government. But of course, it's not independent of the United States government. It is mandated by Congress and accountable to Congress. But Congress isn't accountable to the American people. So therein lies the deception racket. The financial system that feeds from the Federal Reserve answers to the financial system, which is a massive, massive racketeering enterprise that we used to think of as capitalism, but isn't, because of what we show you in the con, which is the blueprint for what we call control fraud and Gresham's dynamic and other highly technical sort of analysis, but that give you the understanding that people just lie. People lie, steal, cheat, and deceit to steal money. Okay, there are remedies for that. It's called the law, and there's different laws for different fraud circumstances, but particularly the one that we all recognize. And I said this incorrectly in one of my recent truth bombs, which is hilarious given what we're all talking about in terms of conspiracy. But the racketeering statute is racketeered, influenced, corrupt organization, which means it all operates around a conspiracy. And mainstream media is quick to point out that all of MAGA has lost their minds because of the stuff that we've seen recently, because of all of the nature of what's going on. And yes, they have. But that is to have a catch-all to say, well, look, never mind the idea of conspiracy theory. Listen, the system's working exactly as it should. No, it's not. We gave $33 trillion to the largest racketeering enterprise in history illegally, based on what the statute said, which is Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which enables the Federal Reserve to provide liquidity as the lender of last resort to an economy that is a superpower for a lot of different reasons, but primarily the most important basis and foundation of it all is Saudi Arabia is the swing producer, because oil is basically the gold of this era, which enables the United States to be the world's reserve currency, that enables us to close the curtains. And the media was in on the conspiracy to make sure that nobody knew this, which is why I had to go on this monumental journey that took over a decade and took millions of dollars to realize and achieve, to get the nuts and bolts of what mainstream media with tens of thousands of employees and investigators and billions of dollars of budget, and same with the United States government, who operates to the tune of $90 billion a year through the Department of Justice, through the Federal Reserve regulators, through the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and AGs and the Securities and Exchange Commission and other elements, north of $90 billion a year, and tens of thousands of employees couldn't do. That's why I had to go and figure out what happened, and I did. And it's not rocket science. Again, it's racketeering. And $70 trillion has been looted from the Federal Reserve since 2003 to feed this insane system, like giving crack to a crackhead or heroin to a junkie over and over and over. And who are the junkies in this situation? It's the financial system. Because again, Federal Reserve Act 13.3 says directly in the statutes that you don't loan to an insolvent institution, particularly if it got that way. And it doesn't say this part, but it should. And if I were the president of the United States, I would get in front of Congress and I would get the bully pulpit and I would fight for this language that says, especially if that institution is guilty of racketeering. And then you might say to yourself, dude, Patrick, what are you, nuts? Of course, that's the whole situation. That's common sense. That's the Department of Justice would have done that if they had the evidence. Oh, yeah, they had the evidence, and they said everything that I'm telling you, and all of the civil settlements that Eric Holder said, look, everything that what I'm telling you is exactly what happened, but we're not going to bring criminal judgments against the CEOs and these too big to fail banks because it would train wreck the global economy. So we're going to let them get away with it, and we're going to give them tens of trillions of dollars. That's what they did. And that's what we're in the midst of. And all of it that was really a climax of the previous 4 decades of what we did got worse and worse and worse every single decade, which is all the opposite of equilibrium, of separation of powers, of the ideals of democracy, of the ideals of the free market. None of that is what we're talking about. We're talking about a grand conspiracy of the power from intelligence and finance and the law and military industrial and the fossil fuel, and then everything that comes down from there, which are all the giant corporations and agriculture and, name the big things that you depend on. And that's the deal. And then we basically farmed out all production and we became middlemen, and then we just destroyed the middle class. So what we're going to do with the Clean New Deal is we're going to use all of the catch-all information, we're going to aggregate it, and we're going to be able to push it through Congress to force the investigation, to hold the guilty accountable through the law with all of the information that we have that proves it soup to nuts, which is child's play, quite frankly, compared to other things that we prove on a daily basis. It's just so monumental. This thing had tens of millions of felonies, again, that led to, over the course of 13 years, $70 trillion to this system of crime. And ultimately, what we're going to do beyond that is make the case that it's like, okay, well, if all of these institutions robbed and basically looted and raped the American middle class, which they did. And by the way, this starts with predation of minorities through the food chain, through everybody that's not in on it, including the white working class through pensions. Everybody in the United States got freaking destroyed by this. And we gave trillions of dollars to the masters, which is insanity. It's the most incredibly vile, despicable, diabolical betrayal I can possibly think of. But the reason why I don't have a sort of hostility, like let's say somebody like Adolf Hitler or maybe Stalin, and there's a lot of different variables of that, or Mao for that reason, and there are different variables for that, is because I believe in liberty and justice for all, which means I believe in the integrity of law, which is to hold power to account, which, if you don't know, is the entire purpose of the United States and the government vis-a-vis the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because we were born out of tyranny. And what I'm explaining to you is this is tyranny, whether it's the pharaohs or the new pharaohs or the new confederacy or the new robber barons. Why can't you see it? And all of media, mainstream media is in on it, and all of independent media, vis-a-vis, let's say, Elon Musk and Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson and all of the rest of these guys, Glenn Greenwald and blah, blah, blah. They're all in on the other side because they're getting MAGA bait and clickbait, and they're getting paid by the system. And I don't know where Steve Bannon and all these guys fit in, but the right-wing, billionaires and everybody else, man, these guys are crafty. And they've been doing this stuff. You just look at the Koch enterprises and what they've been involved with. And go back to the Jim Birch Society. It's all John Birch Society. It's all this racketeering and this methodology of power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The only thing it can hold it accountable is an integrity of the law of by and for the people. This government is not of by and for the people. This government is of by and for the corruption. And we're going to create a tidal wave crusade, populist crusade, to purge corruption using the law and to drown the fascism it fuels. Because as we can see, there's just a lot of people in Looneyville, and it's easy to get Looneyville when everybody's lying to you. And the system is lying to us. And it's really okay for the top 5% and 10% because they're not breaking the law, but their assets have gone up. Their, the bonds have gone up. Their stocks have gone up. They're not asking questions because they're usually too busy doing what their profession it determines of them, whether they're pilots, whether they're engineers, whether they're software engineers, whether they're doctors. I mean, we can give them an out. They're not the ones that created this system. The top 0.001% did, and it's billionaires spend billions to loot trillions because the lowest ROI is corruption. So if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and decency and integrity and liberty and justice for all, and of course, sustainability, which all leads to beauty, if we come together in unity and we come out of our silos and tens of millions of us are equipped with the truth that I am giving to you, then we will erect the clean new deal. And that is our destiny, to purge the misery of tyranny. And quite frankly, there is nothing more American than that. Do you believe in fairness? Do you believe in dynamism? Do you believe that people should have opportunities to do great things? Yeah, so do I. Because have we done it in the past, the United States? Oh, yeah. Have we been struggling with the better nature of our angels from the beginning and the demons of disaster? Oh, yeah. It's called life. And it's called nothing will ever be perfect, but there's got to be a way. Again, things can be perfect. We got people to the moon. We landed on the moon. We build incredible technology. We can fly airplanes. We've proved the impossible throughout the history of the United States. And same with many people around the world. But the United States has had a special a presence in moving the world forward, and we have to do it again. And so again, if we're able to purge the corruption, hold the bad guys accountable, reveal to the world the corruption within our financial system, and how the Federal Reserve uses the full faith and credit of the United States to basically provide trillions of dollars to racketeering, and we get rid of all of that, and not to mention all of the fucking corruption in the judiciary, and that's purging. Yeah, but all of it has to be done by the law. I'm not looking for everybody to go get weapons and start ripping people out of their, ivory towers and then beheading them in the street circles. No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. Because even if we did do that, for example, and I'm not suggesting to you that in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's a good idea. No, you would never beat the strongest military in the history of the world. All the bad guys have to do is basically turn on a couple of switches, mobilize different things, and this, revolution would be over. Unless tens of millions of us got people in the military to come on our side. And again, it's in service to the law, to just use the law, to have integrity of the law. When you have evidence, like all of the four elements of a murder investigation of mens rea and opportunity and whatever the four, it's I don't need to go there. I know what they are. I'm just trying to get this out because the Super Bowl's coming. Millions of people need to understand what the hell is going on. There is no time to lose. And by the way, if we could show the American people that 70 trillion was gutted from the middle class and all of this, transactional situation of theft to the owner class, and they all depend upon oil at the base of this, which is poisoning our planet and has been for the last many, many, many decades, and we have the science and we understand this. We have to create a new dynamic economy using technology to transition to renewable energy completely. And it's not to take away jobs from those in the fossil fuel industry. It's to transition those who have jobs in the fossil fuel industry into producing the new infrastructure. And can you imagine what we could do with $70 trillion committed to this outcome? I can tell you right now, to rebuild the entire energy infrastructure grid and what it would lead into the productive capacity is on the tune of like 7 trillion, 6 to 7 trillion. That's not 70 trillion. There's nothing that we can't accomplish as the American people. But unlike Toby Keith, who was singing at the top of his lungs, and I was singing with him, of the courtesy of the red, white, and blue, and then you're going to go play ball with the guys that actually created and enabled and played a huge role. And I'm not saying that Saudi is specifically and solely responsible for 9/11, not remotely. It's a much bigger conversation, and there's more to it than that. But at the same time, yeah, they were deeply involved. And for everybody to just conveniently, from the PGA to Congress to our investment structure to politicians and everybody in between, given all of the human rights stuff and everything else, it's just another example and expression of the hypocrisy I'm telling you about. Will you join us today? We're asking you for a $13 contribution. We're asking you if you can design shirts, if you can, sing music, create music, if you're a software engineer. We need everybody from every walk of life that is dynamic and creative and gifted, and above all, motivated to be able to rise. This rising tide raises all ships to save the United States. Because right now, we're in a colossal disaster. There's still tens of millions of people that support Donald Trump, given everything that we're talking about. But I know not all of the people who support Donald Trump understand the situation. And I know not all of the people who just support Donald Trump are people that are Nazis. I know that. Like I interact with them. I know them. I see them. I've talked to them. A lot of them are very, very good people. They just don't have the evidence and they're not listening. They're listening to the propaganda of Fox, by the way, who spent $787 million during the Dominion lawsuit to say that, oh, yeah, our business model is lying. And they're not hearing that. There's no credibility. But again, what about MSNBC and the whataboutism? No, MSNBC and Rachel Maddow is the expression of the communication director of the Wall Street meritocracy revolving door. Do they give a lot of good information? Sometimes, yeah. Do they hide a lot of the information that I'm revealing to you? You bet your ass they are. Because they're getting paid from it too. There's no way in hell the Federal Reserve can be allowed to continue to operate independently for criminals. That's what they're doing. That's what I have the answers of. If you don't believe me, ping me. We can talk about it. Watch my 455 truth bombs or whatever number I'm up to. Maybe it's 457. I do this every single day because I know what's at stake. And I do believe in the miracle of life. I do believe in the miracle of democracy. I do believe in the brilliance of people that pull off the inevitable and the impossible. I'm just trying to create a soil that makes flourishing possible. That's through dynamism. And that's what we have to do with the Clean New Deal. We have to purge the poison of lies and deception and betrayal. Failure is not an option. Rise, roar, revolt. This is the Clean New Deal. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. This isn't rocket science, it's racketeering. And above all, this is the righteous grind. Onwards and upwards.